So welcome everybody. Welcome back. We are so I am wow. I am just so excited from listening to Lola this morning and knowing the panel that we have coming up now. And I'm already full, and I am looking to expand that space so that I become fuller, because I know there's more. I know there's more that I get to learn this morning, and I am very excited about that. So welcome back to the Community Practice on Autism Spectrum Disorder, in partnership with the Urban Autism Summit of Milwaukee and the Autism Society of Southeastern Wisconsin, with support from CISA One. We couldn't do this without our partners at CISA One and their sharing of their tech and lending of their personnel to help us plan and to help us put this on. So we're glad you are here today. We are on the second part of our morning, and that is our family panel. And so I'm going to turn it over to Emily Levine. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Tim. I know I had questions prepared, but I might deviate slightly from that, given the powerful message we just heard from Lola this morning. I want to start by thanking the panelists, Rechelle Chaffee, Daysi Jimenez, Ida Winters, for being with us. If you're not on the panel, can you please mute? Barbara Bonfield, you're not muted, and I'm getting some sound from you.
Sorry.
Or maybe Tim could mute her. Oh, thank you. Thank you. I know we're all at home at Zoom, and sometimes real life intrudes, right? So I'm just going to start by asking each panelist to just briefly introduce yourself, talk about where you live and what school district you're in, and your children ages, and which ones are in special education, and give us a little bit of an idea of what your first experience of special education system was. And we'll go alphabetically. So Rechelle, you want to start?
Absolutely. So my name is Rechelle Chaffee. I live in Cedarburg, very conservative Cedarburg, as a biracial family. So that's 2 boxes we're checking to be different. And my son is 16 years old. We were very late to the party with a few diagnoses, quite honestly. My husband and I were older when we had our son. And we just thought, wow, this is harder than any book I've ever read, harder than anything I knew. This is a challenge. And it's going to get easier. So my first interaction, quite honestly, was with the school district. We always dreaded conference time, quite honestly, but we were just nervous about that. And when we got to first grade, my first interaction with school and special education was a very loving teacher that called us in after our son's 3rd day of first grade. And my husband is 6'3", as you can imagine, a 6'3" guy and a wild curly-haired mom sitting at a table across from a teacher. And she said, I think we have some challenges. I think your son might have some special needs. I think we need to research those. And quite honestly, I am very private, and I didn't want the school's involvement. So I said, thank you very much. I will find this out on my own. However, building a partnership with the school through years now, not going to say the work is not there, but I don't lose hope because of the relationships I've been able to build. And I'm also very active at my school by design. So that was my first interaction with school and special education. We now have an IEP. We started with a 504. We now have an IEP. We're in the trenches every day, but the fight is worth it. So that's who I am.
Thanks, Rechelle. Daysi, I'll just remind you of the boxes you have to check really quick. So what your name is, what city and school district you live in, who you're the parent of, and your first experience with special education system.
morning, everyone. Thanks for having us this morning. So my name is Daysi Jimenez, and I have made West Dallas my home, but I'm an immigrant, so I'm originally from El Salvador. Moved to the States when I was 14. So a lot of the things that I was listening from Lola resembles a lot of what my home life to some degree was as well. I'm the mother of two children. My oldest is 11 and my youngest is 9. I knew that my Ben was autistic at 18 months. And I had to fight a little bit with my pediatrician to really get her to listen. I am, for lack of better word, the victim of misunderstanding of what it means to raise a child in a bilingual home. So a lot of his speech delays were attributed to the fact that we were a bilingual home. And so there was a lot of misconception on the part, but I'm also the victim of the fact that my pediatrician have only known autism on individuals who needed a lot of support and not on children that look like my child who needed less support, but he still needed support. And so I think that all those things just really compile and make that early process difficult for us. I have a neurotypical 9-year-old who is just a beautiful, amazing sibling who has grown up with his brother and understands, even though they don't always get along like siblings typically do. But he's definitely, he reminds me a lot of what Lola was describing about herself. So I love that he's able to really grow up with Ben. My first encounter with the educational system was with birth to 3. Also a lot of misconceptions as to who can access birth to 3, because my pediatrician kept telling me that I would have to pay for it out of pocket, and then I maybe shouldn't even go through there. So I started with a lot of barriers that didn't really stop me because also as a professional, I'm a social worker. So when one door closes, I open a window or figured out how to open that window. So thankfully, my persistence was able to eventually get us to some early services. And we were able to really get a good team who was able to really get us going with services. And that's where the beginning of my hope really started, kind of going back to what Lola was saying. Easter Seals was our provider for birth to 3, and we had a wonderful speech therapist who on the first speech session we had sat both my husband and I and said, you should get Ben tested for autism. And I said, thank God. Someone else is saying it, because my husband was struggling hearing that. And so by 2.5, Ben had been already diagnosed, and 2 months before he turned 3, he had already started ABA therapy at home, and our birth to 3 team helped us get transferred to the school services for early childhood education services. And Ben has been thriving ever since then. Bumpy roads, we still have bumpy roads, but now we're entering middle school. And that's a whole different ball game. But we're pushing through, and he's resilient, I'm resilient. And even though despite of all these different barriers, we keep pushing through. Thanks for having us here, having me this morning.
Thank you, Daysi. So Ida, I just want you to, I'll go over the same questions so they're fresh in your mind. Just tell us what your name is, what city you live in, what school district you're in, your children, and what was your first experience with the special education system?
So I'm Ida Winters. I'm from city of Milwaukee in the MPS, Milwaukee Public School District. I'm the parent of 3 sons, oldest one 19, 16, and 15. My 2 older ones have special health care needs. And my younger one, he was diagnosed with autism a week before his 14th birthday. My first experience with special education system was basically them telling me from K3 all the way till 5th grade that he didn't qualify. So he wasn't able to get any assistance. He had a diagnosis of ADHD, OCD, ODD, depression, and psychosis, and they said he didn't qualify. So in 5th grade, he was able to finally get an IEP when he was facing expulsion from school. And Wisconsin Fast stepped in and got the IEP process going, and he was finally approved with their assistance. And he remained in the school despite the principal telling him, the director who was directing the meeting for the expulsion, therapist from wraparound, and myself, that she didn't want him there. And I agreed with her, but they still made him continue to go to school there. He was, he loved school. He didn't talk to the other children. He didn't play on the playground with the children. He didn't interact. He answered questions that was asked of him, but that was it. And so they were saying that he didn't qualify for IEP because it didn't affect his learning. I don't know how it didn't affect his learning, because I'm constantly being called to pick him up from school, and he's constantly being suspended. And they're saying his meltdowns were affecting the other kids' learning. So IEP still he wasn't qualified for it. And by the 5th grade, when he was qualified for IEP, they gave him OT, PT, and he was able to see the psychologist in school. And they got rid of the school psychologist. So that was a lot of anxiety for him. And OT was 10 minutes a week, and physical therapy was 10 minutes a week, and then it went to 10 minutes a month. So thank you all for having me here.
Thanks, Ida. One thing that Lola talked about was how professionals can be hope multipliers. And sometimes when things are tough, it's hard to find that hopeful ray to hang on to. But I was thinking about, as a parent, when you get engaged with the IEP process, did you feel hopeful? And how did you feel? Have you always felt you were a full team member? Did you find people that encouraged you? And did you feel prepared to be a team member on your IEP team? We'll keep going alphabetically unless somebody has a burning need, just let me know. But so Rechelle, I'll let you go first.
Okay, those were lots of questions there. So jump in, Emily, if I do not remember all of them. When we initially sat down, we started with a 504, quite honestly, and as the needs have been further identified as we get older in school, and the challenges are more frequent with the desire to have an individual strive to be independent, we got moved to the IEP because it provided more structured support that was needed at the high school level. I'll be honest, initially, I was absolutely confused about what the whole thing was, what I qualified for, what language I was supposed to use, what I should ask for. My model when I got knee deep in this with my son was to quit my corporate job and become mom of the universe and do everything Wade. I was very moved by, no crying in baseball. I was very moved by Lola saying that the way she fills her well up is by remembering who she was as a person before caregiving. I lost track of that a little bit when I began this journey with my child, and I literally put everything I could into Wade and still kept a lot of the onus, regretfully so, on myself to help Wade succeed in school, when I really should have been working with my team, strategizing, asking the right questions, and pushing them to actually put concrete action items in my IEP that we could both talk about and hold each other accountable for. So that was a great lesson that I learned early on. But after I really dived into understanding my rights, what I should be getting out of an IEP, what to ask for, and then how to make sure that was worded correctly. And quite honestly, I had an outside source. I hired an outside source to really help me understand that from the parent perspective. As I mentioned, I have been very active in all of the schools. I'm always very active in the schools. I hold a board position at every school to this day, within the parent group of all of the schools I'm at. So teachers, paras, administration know me. But knowing what I needed to ask for and build in those supports for my son, I was late to that party. But once I got caught up and I knew what to ask for, my personal model, this is so funny, Daisy and I were talking about this even today with interactions. I always try to start off with a positive, commend, counsel, commend. So if I have something I need changed, or if I felt like there was something that I wanted to ask for us to do better in the future, there's always a positive, there's always hope somewhere, yes, pun intended, even within those interactions. And I will say today, I feel very supported. I have regular communications with our support team. And sometimes I generate those. And sometimes it's just a, hey, I want to thank you. I saw this note. I know you have 97 students and you can give 2 minutes to each one of them. I appreciate you taking out the time to give my son his 2 minutes. So I do feel now that I have a really supported team, but it was a journey for me to get there. And some of the steps I used were that frequent communication, that positive communication, but also understanding what I had a right to ask for. That made me feel vested, and it made me feel like I could be succinct and communicate what I needed from my team. And then they could also give me that back because they knew who I was because of my volunteer service at the schools as well.
Thanks, Rechelle. So Daisy, same question about, IEP process. How did you engage? How did you feel supported? And did you feel prepared to be a team member?
So, full disclosure, at the time that I was going through this whole process, I was a school social worker. So yes, to some degree I was prepared, but it's a lot different when you are an advocate at the table for your student, when you're now an advocate at the table for your kid. So it's different, right? The emotions are there in many different ways. So even though I understood the process and I was able to keep up with the language, one thing that I was realizing that the team was not doing is that they were not explaining a lot of this to my husband. So then he was really confused through this process a lot. And so then I feel like I had spent a lot of time just making sure that I catch him up. So then I'm not the sole parent who's kind of just understanding all of these dynamics that are going on. My first IEP, my first special education evaluation happened at the house because he was not in school, right? And so that was interesting. I don't think the team realized how overwhelmed I was having 5 adults all talking about my kid, throwing papers at me. And I kept thinking, but I have to keep up, right? This is what I need to do because I can do this, right? And so, and we made it. And the psychologist was really good about explaining to me the criteria. By then we had a medical diagnosis. He kept telling me that that was not necessary for this process to go through. Now, granted, by then I have read everything, right? Because I was determined that I was going to be at this table and that I was part of this team. No one was going to talk over me. I'm going to understand this. I'm going to ask questions. And I think that at times may have come defensive for some people, but I wanted to make sure that I got the respect that I wanted to have at the table as a key player, right? This is my kid. I'm trusting you with my child who at 3 years old, without being able to communicate verbally, I'm sending him to you. And you're telling me that I need to trust you. That was a really hard process for me. We have been in the West Dallas, West Milwaukee School District, and it has been bumpy at times, but I think overall they have been very cooperative and really good partners working with me. They do see me as a true partner in the team. Sometimes now that my son is in middle school, we're talking about how I want them to also be able to set some boundaries, because sometimes it's very easy for the team to also rely a lot on me. Because at the end of the day, the one that's reading the most, the one that's going to workshops, to trainings, and trying to really keep up with everything that's going on how to best support my son, it's me. And so there's a lot of things that I try to make sure that that I create a little bit of that separation. There were times where I think the team didn't. This clear to me that there were times when I would come to the table that the team wouldn't necessarily always know what is really the best practices out there to engage a kiddo that has fine motor skills difficulties. It was clear to me that the team didn't always know how to engage a reader, etc. So I think that there were things that I found myself investing a lot of time in, things that I wish that they would have had the time to invest. I do come to realize now, very early on, I came to realize that it wasn't just my kid that they were servicing, that they were servicing so many other kids, which then brought me to, okay, so then I can talk about this just at the school level. So I'm really involved at the district level, and I partner a lot with the school administrators and the school board, because the reality is that if I want inclusive education for my child, then I want inclusive education for all of the kids that need to have that. So I work my way up to really just make sure that we're trickling all that to where it needs to be in our schools. So that's kind of how I do it. I go to all meetings. Our meetings, one thing that I would encourage anyone that's here, either as a parent or even as a professional, is very overwhelming reading IEPs. I literally have to sit down and be in a good mindset. I have been lucky that every time we're getting ready for an IEP meeting, I always get a draft before. I read it, I make notes, I come prepared with my notes. My team creates agendas and we go over that and we break it down. All of that is hard to do sometimes when we're not in the right place of mind, and there's so much to go through. But I'll be honest with you, a lot of parents, even at times, I don't know necessarily what to ask, kind of going back to what Rechelle can. So that process can be really overwhelming for a parent, and sometimes they really do need that support from the provider, a case manager that's working with them. Wisconsin Facets is a great resource for parents who really want to navigate more of this and dive into this more. So there are a lot of resources that parents can access to help them feel more prepared.
Thanks, Daysi. That's really helpful. Ida, same question. You know, as you got involved in the IEP process, did you feel prepared to be a team member? How did the school invite you to engage in the IEP process? And what helped you feel like you're part of the IEP team?
So I felt clueless for the IEP process. I didn't even know the parent was part of the IEP process. I thought it was kind of, your child is there, the people who work with him on a daily basis can see what it is that he would need. I got an invitation to the IEP meeting, and they're like, oh, it's at this time, it's going to be on this day, blah, blah, blah. I show up, they're telling me what they're going to do, and I say, okay. So when I get home, I finally get the papers from the school mailed to me, and I'm reading over the papers, and I'm like, we didn't include that he needed things for his writing or assistance with writing or special pen or note taker. It's like, that's not in here. So there was things in there that was missing that I felt we should have had, but I didn't feel I had a voice in the decision. I thought it was totally the school, which the assistant principal showed up and the special education teacher, and they were the only ones there besides myself. And I was like, that doesn't seem right. I was like, where's this classroom teacher? So I called Wisconsin Facets to ask them about it. And they're like, no, you're a part of it. So you should be including what you know the needs are for your child. But I was like, well, they invited me to a meeting. We met, and they're like, no, you have to speak up. You're the advocate for your child. So you have to tell him what he needs. And they were like, you have the option to recall an IEP meeting. So I was like, no, they told me the next one is in 6 months. And they're like, no, at any time you feel the needs aren't being met, you can call for IEP meeting. So I called for an IEP meeting, and when I get there, they tell me only the special needs, the special education teacher is available. So we had the meeting, just the special education teacher and myself. And, you know, I knew they put occupational therapy in there because he has dysgraphia, and she wasn't there. He had physical therapy. They weren't there. The classroom teacher wasn't there. But I didn't know that the people who work with him should have been in the meeting. So I go back to Wisconsin Facets and I show him, I'm happy. I have the things I asked for in here. And he sees two names on there and he was like, where are the other people? And I was like, oh, we didn't need it. So there was a lot that I didn't know. And I was like at Wisconsin Facets or calling at least twice a week, every week. So I went through some of their training classes they have, how to understand the IEP process, how to understand the IEP forms, who you can have invited to the meeting, who should be there. Can you bring a representative? I learned all of that through there. And the thing is, I found out if you don't ask and if you don't do your research, they won't tell you. I understand it's a lot of students in the school and they have very limited time, but this is part of the school process and we're supposed to be a team. When he received his IEP, they were still calling me to come pick him up, but I'm telling Wisconsin Facets, I was like, I don't know how this is helping because he's not in school. I'm always picking him up. And they were like, no, stop picking him up. If they want to send him home, they need to give him a suspension, and he can only be suspended a certain amount of time before they have to send someone to the home to teach him. And I was like, So I started requesting when they went to send him home, I started requesting that they suspend him. They refused to suspend him, and he was able to stay at school the whole day, and I was able to stay at work the whole day. So it was kind of like I figured out later on, if you have the correct things in the IEP and you have a good understanding of the IEP process and what it's supposed to do, then it works for you. But if you don't, it won't. I volunteered. So when he was in K3, I volunteered from K3 to 5th grade. I was either there the whole day with him or half of the day because I refused to let them send him home. I told him I'm not a teacher and he wouldn't learn anything at home for me. So I sat in the classroom with him and I volunteered. There were some other children in the classroom that you can tell needed that extra assistance. So I would just take the group and work with the whole group, redirecting, helping with writing, helping, calm them down where they're not jumping around the classroom. I did that as a parent, but I was still just seen as a volunteer or a parent, and things didn't change. But I was okay with that at first, but I have 2 other children, plus I need to go to work, so it wasn't working. What is the other question?
I think you covered it.
Okay.
Thank you. That was really helpful. It is very frustrating when you're getting started, and that's why I included that question, because as parents, we don't necessarily know. And one of the questions in the chat that just came up was from Susie Peters about what are a few of the questions parents must ask. So I think we're going to go in reverse because I'll start with Ida this time instead of having her go last. What questions do you think every parent should ask in an IEP meeting?
So I think a good question to ask is, who all is on his team? Who all will he be working with? And my child or your child in particular, whatever the diagnosis is or whatever, what experience do they have in this area? Have you worked with someone who has similar conditions? And how comfortable are you working with someone and being part of the team? Because if the parents and the school are not a team, it can be disastrous. So I don't need you to only call me when something has gone wrong with my child. I need you to call me and tell me when he's doing something well. And I need you to call me and tell me what you've been doing at school and it's been working. And so I can try it at home. And what I'm doing at home, I want you to know so you know it works. We had to put in a behavioral intervention plan. And until that was put in place and actually used, they were just like, we don't know, we just leave them alone, let them sit in the corner or whatever. So you have to ask, really, are you interested in being a team with me?
Thank you. Daysi, you want to talk about some questions you think parents should ask in an IEP meeting?
So, I'm often asked this by other parents. It's like, how do I know my kid is getting the services that the IEP is saying that he should be receiving? And it's interesting because oftentimes we're sending our kids when they're not able to really communicate with us, and we relied on information that other adults that are engaging with him or with them are going to provide to us. So one of the things that I would ask very specifically is like, okay, well, when is he getting this service? How are we meeting those goals? And how are you tracking those goals? Like, I needed to know specifically who's doing this, when, how would I get notified that the goals are working, not working? All of those questions. And I'll be honest with you, they are very, at the beginning, I could see that they were really used to just having like a quick in and out IEP meeting. My IEP meetings can go as long as 2 hours. We are not leaving this table until all these things are answered. And so I think that they know that they need to kind of like now figure out a different way to all of us be prepared and troubleshoot a lot of different things, because no one wants to sit there for 2 hours. I don't either. So what they have done that has been really helpful is when I'm asking all these questions is that I get a detailed schedule of where his minutes are being allocated throughout the day. So this is when he's getting his minutes met by the special education teacher. This is when he's getting speech services on this day of the week. This is when this is happening. And that was really good for me for many, many reasons, right? I was able to kind of figure out when that IEP was being supported and being done, but also that gave me an opportunity to also talk to my kid about his day. So then I would say, oh, today's Tuesday. You saw Miss Kitty. You had speech teacher today. How did it go? So it allowed me to also figure out how his day really went. And so I use that as talking points for my son to be able to share with me some information. But when you're asking those questions, they should be able to tell you when services are being delivered, who's delivering them, how they're tracking them. And then when they're telling you that different behaviors are happening, what Ida was referring to, if your child is having a lot of unexpected behaviors that are disrupting the classroom, the environment, and he can learn, the schools should be doing a functional behavior assessment. They should be tracking why is it that these behaviors are happening. And then that should really allow them to identify what is it that they need to do in a behavior plan. And that's really key. And that has been really key for me as well. It's also really important that you're asking when you know that you have a child that may be behaving physically in a building or in any form of aggression, understanding what is the district's policy on restraint. What is the district's policy on helping calm a child down? So I make sure that the district, I needed to understand if my district would ever put hands on my child. And so we talked about that. That has been delineated really carefully. So just making sure that you have all those measures in place as preventative, because you don't want to try to always come in always at the end as a more intervention. But to me, all those things were really key in asking. And it really has changed a little bit now that my child is a little older and he can communicate a lot. But even to this day, I get answers like, I don't know. So I still have to kind of figure it out how to rely on the team to be able to share some information with me.
Thanks, Daisy. So Rechelle, the question is about, was one in the chat. What are a few questions you think parents must ask?
Mhm. So I'm, as I mentioned, I'm a casebook for starting this process and not doing 100% right initially. I will share that humility that I learned. And when I had my 504 and then my IEP reviewed, I got very specific feedback that I could wrap my brain around. So we know our 504s and our IEPs and our accommodations have the challenges or the things that need to be addressed by the education system. And that's the plan that's given to teachers, staff, paras. But what is sometimes missing is the specific instructions or steps that staff, paras, teachers, administration need to take to help address these issues or these challenges that our children face. So what the feedback I got is make that IEP actionable. Don't make it so vague that it's questionable. So that if, for example, so one of the things I will share, my son he has GAD, so he gets anxiety disorder, especially if he's put on the spot in class. That can be a huge challenge when participation is 30% of your grade. And you're going to have to show participation in ways like, so we have specific language in our IEP that says, figure out a way to judge participation or allow this child to participate in a slightly non-traditional way, because he gets anxiety. It'll freak him right out. Then he's going to act out. He might say something that's completely inappropriate because he's stressed out. So have actionable items. If there's not, and so leading that back to the question that parents as well as providers should be thinking about when they're working on these are, what are the actionable steps I'm asking the staff, or staff, what are the actionable steps I am going to take to help address this behavior that's been identified in the IEP. That's the largest takeaway I had regarding making an IEP effective and asking those questions. And when we had our review every year, they now know, and they come when we sit down, I have suggestions that they reference. So here's what we're seeing. Here's the feedback we got from the teachers. Here's some things we could specifically put in the IEP to help address these things. Well, do you think these would work with your child? We'd like to try this instead of this. So changing that conversation so that I have pinpointed things in my plan that I can say, are you doing this, this, and this? If not, can we do this, this, and this? Or if you are and it's not working, then we need to modify it. So parents ask, what specific steps are put in my IEP that address this concern that's identified in this category? I think that's really important. And I also want to emphasize what Daisy said. This changes as our children get older. What worked in elementary is different than what works in middle school, is different than what works in high school. So if your IEP language and plan has not changed as your child has aged, that's a challenge that you might need to address. So you're going to want to make sure that that IEP is modified as our children learn to communicate, whether it's verbal or nonverbal, in a different way. They're growing and changing. So the IEP 504 should grow and change with them as well. And if it's not, that's another question. I like to start off my meeting with, what's new this year? What are we doing different this year? But I also bring to the meeting what's new with my child this year. And when they're teenagers, holy bats, that should be what's new this week. Because it changes so much. So I think those are things that I've learned to try to make sure that I am prepared. And I'm very, I need an action item. Give me an action item. And I take that energy and that fervor with me in my IEP meetings. Give me an action item. What's your action item? So I think having that specific language, and that was something that was pointed out to me the first time we had one. She's like, this is great. But when we ran into some trouble, there was no actionable steps that were identified in the first plan that we had. So they were like, he had a slip up, he's in trouble, now what? So I think that was a lesson I learned the hard way.
Emily, can I add something to that before we move on to the next question? So another question that I came to realize that I also needed to ask, especially the case manager, the special education teacher, is what do you think you need to help you meet my child's goal this year? And some of them were really honest with me and would say, you know, I haven't had a student with that is neurodivergent, that's, you know, that's autistic. I feel like I could use a refresher. And I said, okay, then let's talk to the district supervisor about this. What else can we do about this? And I'll be honest with you, I actually came to find out the other day, and I think that's a policy issue that I think needs to also be addressed at the district level. They held an IEP meeting for my son after school, and then the teachers are not getting paid for it. So it's already the end of the day. So now let's put that in perspective, right? I mean, it's like they taught all day, and I get it, it's a salary position, and this is kind of part of their roles, but that also doesn't sit well with me either, right? And so it's like, what are we, if we're expecting more and more, and we're not really figuring out how to acknowledge that we're just kind of constantly demanding and not supporting all this, then are they really able to do what's best for all the kids that need support? So sometimes it really does come down to just giving them a cup of coffee because that's all they need. To other times it's really just kind of advocating at other levels. But it is important sometimes to ask that to the team, because sometimes they do OTs and speech therapists. There's not enough money in the budget for different things. So sometimes it's a matter of really just advocating for items. I am also very involved in the different PTAs. And so also making sure that our PTAs are allocating money to a specific classrooms for a specific items, because sometimes Reg Ed teachers are not always asking for those special things that they may really need in some other classrooms. So I'm really an advocate to really make sure that we're not forgetting about that specific group of kids.
Thank you. Ida, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I'm going to add questions you should ask. You should ask your child, what do they feel they need? Do they want to be a part of the meeting? And is what's in their IEP, is that working for them? Because my son, he'll come home like, that doesn't work, that doesn't work, that doesn't work. I don't need that. The kids make fun of me because of this. So, you know, when we know an IEP meeting is coming up, we're sitting down at home creating a plan and what it is that he needs and what it is that I see. And I bring it to his attention that I see this when you do this. I think you need help with this. How would you like that help to look? And we get a lot of, I don't know. So we spend probably a week trying to get this together, because he'll figure out I'm not going to stop asking until he gives me a concrete answer. Okay, you don't like when you're in class and your smart pen is talking out loud. Okay, we'll get you one that doesn't talk. Or get the one where the button isn't right there where your finger is when you're trying to write. It's just simple things like that.
Thank you. I'm looking at questions in the chat. So people are acknowledging that teachers are not able to give 100% to the kids if they are not at 100%, and they have social emotional needs that need to be met as well. There's another question in the chat about, and I'm not going to get real specific about any one child, but a lot of times if our kids are struggling in one subject and they're included in the regular education classroom, how do you negotiate that? How do you, so for instance, in this example, a child has struggles with math and they're in their regular education class for the regular math, as well as getting special education supports. And I guess she just wants to know how would you navigate that? Does anybody have advice for this parent?
I can go.
Okay.
So one of the things I also felt like I needed to learn is that I needed to know how the school system works in my child's school. Because I have come to find out that every school district does things differently. So I needed to know who were all the support people in the system. So for example, there are schools, they have reading intervention, math intervention people, that your IEP drives the support that your child gets. So if the plan is to provide your child's educational services in the main classroom, in the mainstream classroom, that means that if he's that behind academically in one subject, then he should be getting minutes in that subject. So the question becomes, how is he getting those minutes in that subject? In some schools, it means that they're doing small station support groups in that classroom. In other schools, it means that they pull the child out with another group of kids and give those minutes outside of the classroom. So you need to find out in your school, how do they do that? There's a big push in education to do more co-teaching style learning, where we're pulling kids less and just finding ways to deliver the services in the classroom. And so they do what is called this differentiation model, where they have kids go to a specific section who needs support and who's supporting that. Some kids have delays in math, but they're not so delayed that they need to have it IEP. So then there's a math interventionist that works with them. Then there's kids that are really struggling a lot more in math, and then that do have it IEP team that's working with them on that. And so they're delivering those services that way. I think the question is, how are they delivering those services, how they're working with your child in that service. There's no, at the elementary level, there's no other place that they would really be placing your child unless you feel that he would need to be in a self-contained classroom. And that will be different than what you're getting right now. The self-contained classroom would be a modified curriculum than what he is getting in the mainstream classroom. So I think those are the kind of questions you may have. Why is my child in a mainstream classroom versus in a self-contained classroom? What are the goals we're working on? How is he getting those minutes for the supports that he needs? Making sure that you know how he's working towards that. It may be that he may always be behind in math, because that's just maybe at the rate that he's going to be able to work moving forward. That's just who he is. I don't know if that makes sense what I've just said, but that's kind of what I would do myself in asking those questions.
I can tell you how we addressed it as well. Remember I told you about my child, he does not want to be called out in class. He's got that anxiety disorder. He does not, some of the staff would like to have him go with a different group. At our school district, we have a structured resource group called Star Center, and there's a special education teacher that oversees the Star Center, and the groups are broken up small enough that she works individually. She has that, it's basically a class, but it's not, so he's mainstream, but he's not so mainstream that it's obvious when he is in class that he's getting some additional supports. So the way at the high school level, the Cedarburg High School has dealt with it is they have a structured resource center, so that he gets that support, but it's not necessarily as obvious to the rest of the world that he's getting that support in that classroom time. In addition, we have in our IEP built in there for two subjects that we've identified where our child needs additional supports. There's resource times that you can schedule yourself for if you know you need that additional support. And one of the teachers, we were so very blessed, she set up time for our son to have his resource time via Zoom, which has a whole nother set of challenges, but via Zoom, so it's one-on-one once a week. So she gets those extra minutes, but she also takes into account that he doesn't want those extra minutes in the classroom time. She can also do it when she's refreshed so that she's not burnt out at the end of the day, trying to give this child some additional supports where he has trouble processing the assignments and understanding, where traditional children in the class can disseminate that information and know what they have to do. She needs to spend that little extra time with him, reframing that. And so we actually have that built in the IEP in the 2 subjects that we know he needs some additional support for. And another teacher said, why don't you come to this private resource that I have for this group of kids who are studying for AP, and I can give you a few minutes in this class, and we can make sure that you have a grasp of the assignments that are due for the week. So one is in person, but it's during a time where he has other students, and the teacher has proposed to multitask that way, and the other teacher is doing it for a few minutes via Zoom. And those accommodations are built into the IEP and the 2 subjects we've identified that he needs a special support. And my son found his voice enough to tell me, like Ida said, here's the things that I want. I don't need this, that's not working. And he's come to a point now where that structured resource, that structured time with a special education teacher, he was on the fence about not wanting to be different, not wanting to be called out. But he was able to come to the mature decision that, yep, I know that makes me different, but I really need that extra support. I don't care, put me in Star Center. I need Star Center. So, but I let him have a voice this year and let him have the ownership. And thank heavens he made the right decision. I don't know if that's going to be the case next year, but those are some of the accommodations that we've been able to work with the school to figure out how you can give them that extra support that they need. And it's specific in the IEP.
Heidi, did you have anything you wanted to add to that? Okay. So I know we have, in addition to teachers, we have other types of providers here, and all of our kids tend to be complicated kids, have support in various areas and different therapists and different professionals working with them. What types of things help you develop trust and help your child develop trust with a provider or a teacher or a therapist? Who wants to go first?
I'll take it.
Okay.
I'll be brief with this one. I can just tell you the experience that we've had with one of the therapists that helps with our child. The therapist really set out to build a relationship external to the parents with our child, which made my child feel empowered enough to open up and share concerns external of mom and dad. And our therapist has been so helpful. Our therapist, one of Wade's therapists, he has 2, but one of them actually even got involved in the IEP process and wrote a letter of recommendation and shared it with the school district for accommodations with fine motor skills that my son struggles with. He said he was able to provide some additional ideas and action items that we could try, and sent that to the school. And that's actually one of the letters that's in our IEP as well. So therapists, for us personally, what helped was our therapist giving a voice to our son and working out some of the challenges and solutions together, external of mom and dad, and then also being willing to put some of the recommendations and thoughts in writing and being able to share those with the school district ended up being very helpful for us.
I can agree. The therapist. So my middle child was part of wraparound, and we had a therapist that was a family therapist. And sometimes my child, who the therapist was there for, didn't want to do therapy, so we had sessions together. And I would talk about, what's going on, where I'm struggling at, what gives me stress and it bubbles over into home. And, a big issue was with my younger son in the school in the IEP process. So she started attending IEP meetings with me. She was a school therapist outside of wraparound. So, she recognized a lot of things and she talked to him about a lot of things that was going on. And, she was a partner. And also we have, so I work in Next Step Clinic and we have therapists, psychologists, social worker, different people from different disciplines there. And, I can talk to them and I'm seeing things from me as personal parent perspective. And they're showing me things or teaching me things from a professional perspective because I'm like, they're singling this child out. They don't want to do anything because he's more high functioning and he's pretty self-sufficient, but they have him doing things where it's a limited amount of time because they feel it's wasted time. And, they're breaking it down to me with the special ed teacher who's there at the clinic. And she's like, no, that's actually not how it works. They have a certain amount of time and it's built into the IEP. And like, I didn't notice that there was an actual amount of time listed on the IEP, but I had to go look at it and I had to challenge it. And I went back to the school and he needs more time with OT. He's not getting enough time, or he needs some adaptive equipment. So he wouldn't need that much time. But, that was something. It took others outside of there, but inside the profession in order for me to build trust with the people who work with him at school. He's at a new school this year. Well, starting last year, it was his 9th grade year, but he was on Zoom, but he's physically in the school now. But I was able to build a relationship with them 5 years ago when my older son started at that school. So they knew me and we had a relationship and it's an ongoing relationship.
Emily, I'm sorry, I don't remember what was the question you asked.
So we all have multiple people in our kids' lives, not only educators, but also different types of therapists and providers. And what are some things that they can do to help build trust between you and your child and them?
And Emily, I know you're the moderator, but I would love to hear you preach on this. Can we ask you that question? Sorry, I know you know, girl.
Well, I don't think we have enough time. Daysi, you go.
I think we have tried a few different things. I think one of the things that helps me in that process is that I need communication. I need communication, clear communication happening between all the people involved. My son right now is doing daily living skills, and I can sense the frustration from his provider when I'm telling her about some of the things that are going on in school, and in her head is like, wait, they don't understand this. We could be doing this and that. And I'm like, yep, I get it. And I feel validated. So that helps me understand that other people really do understand. And so I think for me, it's just a lot of transparency, a lot of communication, a lot of ability to then also collaborate with each other. If I don't know what's going on and I don't know what I can do to really help either, then I feel like I'm just sort of out of the loop. I don't know. So that would be kind of part of it. But I think that the key to that is that it's really hard to merge the medical field with the school field because they're working towards they're working towards same goals, but in different ways. So sometimes they do clash with each other and they don't always agree. And so I think that it can definitely create a frustration, in terms of finding that sort of medium to find ways to collaborate.
Thank you. There was a comment in the chat about student-led IEPs. And I was just wondering if anybody has experience. I know, Daysi, you replied in the chat that your son is still He's only in 6th grade, so he might not be ready for to lead quite yet. But for Ida and Rechelle, you have little older kids. Have either of you tried to, how do you include your student in the IEP process?
I love, actually the steps that Ida shared in a previous question are some of the things that we do with Wade, or my son, oops, sorry. He's in 11th grade, and the school district is really, and his support team is really encouraging. By the time they get to 11th grade, they still struggle with, he might not be typically an 11th grader, but they really put a lot of emphasis on the student-led IEPs. We do what Ida mentioned she does in her family. However, we pushed that envelope. They actually wanted to start it in 6th grade. We were completely ill prepared, as was our child, not comfortable enough to even be able to articulate and be organized in his thinking enough to know what he needed in his IEP, what he wanted, what was working, what was not working. Home was a safer space to have those conversations. So we had those conversations, like Ida said, and that takes time. So when we know that our meeting is coming up, we start that prep work a month out with our kiddo, because we also can't overwhelm. We can't ask every little bullet, is this working? Is this not working in one night? Because we got a lot of I don't knows, and we still get a lot of I don't knows initially, and we are older and so I have to plant the seeds at home. And then we have been gradually saying, okay, so out of all this stuff we want to change, what are maybe 2 things you're comfortable talking about? What are 2 things you want to address specifically with the team about getting some additional supports and help? And we chunk it down that way. I think that student-led IEPs are absolutely fabulous, but I'm not necessarily sure that they fit for every child that has an IEP. So in our house, we're not at a point, and we're in 11th grade, where he's comfortable, or we're comfortable having him be the major voice. We're working towards that, but we are still not there, to be quite honest. But we are involving our child to have definitely more ownership. The steps that Ida identified, we do as well over a longer period of time, because we've also layered that frosting on that cake, that we do want our child to have a voice at these meetings and at least take one action item that they want to ask for support or change. So that's how we are addressing the student-led IEP. And I know for some reason in my district, that's very important. We tried that in 6th grade and it did not work for us. So we were like, no way, not ready yet. Let's revisit this, because we knew our family, we knew our kiddo wasn't ready for it yet. So that's how we were addressing it in our home.
Thanks. Ida, do you have something to add?
So we were kind of thrown into the student-led IEP at 6th grade. So, I didn't know that, I had the option to say no. So we were kind of thrown into it, which it started off, he had very little to say. I don't know. Okay, that's fine. Can I go back to class? That's how it started out. So now at the school that he's at, I have to prepare for the IEP. We do what we do at home. But in school, when he works with the resource teacher, she's helping him prepare a PowerPoint for his IEP. And, I was really amazed with it. So when he gets there, if he's really anxious and doesn't want to say what it is that he needs or what he thinks should change, he can always use this PowerPoint and we can go over the PowerPoint. So it's made it really nice for that thing. And, he can ask school, how do they feel about this? And he's asking, is this something I can request? He's in a charter MPS school at the time, but they have it set up so every child in the school has study hall, but in study hall, if you need help in a certain subject, you don't really go to study hall, you go to that classroom. So Spanish is a weak subject for him. He's not really strong in Spanish. So he goes to the Spanish room. and they don't know it's because, he has an IEP and needs the extra assistance or whatever. Instead, there's a whole group that goes to. So it's not like he's singled out.
Thank you. And I just want to say, my son is an adult and he never led his IEP, but we always asked him to participate. And for him, sitting through a whole meeting was not something he could do. But we did always have him there at the beginning and have him have something to say. And this was, he's in his 30s, so this was before PowerPoint. But we did help him like get ready and have something he could share and some kind of goal, because I just felt like it was important to start the meeting being centered with who this meeting was about.
Can I just share really quickly that one of the things that I'm doing, even though my kiddo is only in 6th grade, is that I'm trying to teach him how he can actually have a voice. So when he's telling me, I don't want to do this, or I don't like that, I validate and I say, well, thank you for telling me that you don't like that. Sometimes it's important that we make sure other people know, because they can read your mind. Sometimes my son thinks that we can see his thoughts, right? And so I'm constantly reminding him that no one can see his thoughts, so he needs to be able to say. My son is able to communicate verbally. So he recently learned, and even though this is something, we're very civil rights, advocacy family. So, but he recently started hearing terms in school that he was not always hearing before. So he learned the word racism. And in one of the discussions he was having with me, he used the word to say, well, Mom, you're being a racist. And I said, I was redirecting him on something. So I'm parenting, right? I'm not doing anything that would really apply for him to use that word. But I think that was his way of trying to say that he's advocating, right? And so I think that's good that I'm kind of seeing some of that, because I think he's trying to kind of figure out what all the different words means and how he can kind of do this and how he can actually do it effectively. I don't know whether he'll actually sit in the IEP. I think he is starting to feel a little bit different with having all these people hovering over him. So I think that's something that we're going to have to definitely tackle as we're going through this, because there's definitely more awareness.
So I don't see any other questions in the chat. Does anybody have anything in addition they wanted to add? Somebody said that they love the idea of Ida's son having a resource teacher help him create a PowerPoint. What a great way to help him learn how to advocate for himself and also accommodate his needs in a way that works for him. That's very cool.
I'm going to add one other thing. We have a lot, I'm going to plug the Autism Society, but really it's a tool that is fabulous, no matter what challenge you're having, to help your child find a voice, but also to communicate with the teachers. If you go on our website, there is a form called Get to Know My Child. It's a wonderful tool that we fill out with our child at the beginning of every year that says that in addition to the IEP, it's just, we put a little picture of our kiddo on we modify it every year, and it asks specific questions. It's a form you can download and make your own, just giving that one cheater of, hey, if you want to get my son's attention if he's not paying attention in class, and you lightly touch him on his right shoulder, that's a touch point for him to focus back in classroom. COVID has now changed things, but you can use that form as a communication tool in addition to your IEP to just start the year right. I have to celebrate the hope that Daysi emphasized when she said one of the questions she asks the teachers is, what can I give you to succeed or to help my child succeed at the beginning of the year? What a way to start the conversation off in a positive way. But also that form helps it's all personal connection. The more real and personal and wonderful you can share the wonderful things you love about your child with the staff, hopefully the more vested they will be to see your child succeed. So I would also encourage, take that time to educate and share a snippet of who your kiddo is on a personal level with each one of your teachers at the beginning of the year. We send a reminder out in August, but that is a wonderful form that I would highly recommend any parents here start to utilize in their communications with staff for the future.
I also use it a lot, Rechelle. And one of the things that I really loved, we just had conferences last week, and I didn't hear a lot of good things at conferences. But one of the things that I did hear is that the teacher had looked at this form that I have given to them in August and was able to engage my son in a conversation because he kept saying to her, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know. And then she said to him, it's like, wait, you went camping this summer. How about if we write about that? What did you like the most about camping? And she used it as talking points. And that made a huge difference for me because I think also what I'm trying to minimize is the need for them to constantly then call me to kind of figure out how to get some information and using what we're giving them. So that was really good for me to hear that she actually read that because she engaged him on writing a paper about that experience over the summer.
Rechelle, can you share the link to that form in the chat?
Yes,
I just
ma'am,
did.
I will do that. Oh, you did. Go.
Yeah, I just did.
Team. Woo. Wonderful.
So while we're talking today about intersectionality and about how different identities can cause more problems, I think one thing we need to acknowledge is that, you know, some people believe that not all families care about education and that they don't want to be involved, or they make assumptions that families aren't capable of participating in their child's IEP meetings or their child's education. And I just wondered if you've encountered people who have shared that belief, and if so, how did you address it, or did you choose to not address it? That's a tough question. Nobody wants to go first. Rechelle, I'm going to make you go first.
We are a brown family in a very, very white school district. That's not something we're turning off, and that's something that we work every day to foster inclusivity, and sometimes we have had to have a couple of tough conversations. They're not comfortable. I am just trying to prepare my child to be comfortable having those conversations and being an advocate and supporter of differences as well. I can't tell you today that that's easy where we live, and it takes lots of work. And sometimes mama has to do it, and sometimes daddy has to do it, because sometimes it's a lot to put on a kid, you know, no matter what child, that if they don't feel represented or appreciated or understood. In our district at the high school level, the last time I saw the report, out of 1,100 students, there were 6 that were African American. So there's not a large Black population where we are. So we're working on awareness, education, and inclusion. And I won't tell you that that doesn't involve working on educating the educators on awareness, education, and inclusion. But once again, commend, counsel, commend. That's my model for getting those tough comments across. I will start with something positive, even if it's just, I like your shoes. I'm going to give you something positive first. Did that answer it kind of, Em?
Yeah, thank you. Daysi, did you have something you wanted to add?
The question is, some people believe that not all families care about education, that they don't want to be involved, right? Is that the question you're asking? You know, I reflect a lot on the kind of parent I am about education, just going back to my mom cared a lot about education. She wanted the best for us. I'm the only child, that went to college, and I'm the youngest, right? Which should have been my sister, right? You know, the first one, right? And so I think that I'm an overachiever for many reasons. And I think that I had to put in perspective about what I expected or wanted to see in my children. I don't have expectations anymore that they need to really go and pursue this and pursue that. But I do have to recognize that there are a lot of families that sometimes have never graduated high school, have not even graduated middle school. And I'm sorry, the educational system is hard to navigate, even for someone that is educated, you know, whatever, educated, right? So it's like, we don't make it easy for families to understand some of these things. And we throw all this jargon at them, all this educational jargon, all these different things. It's like the fact that people sometimes don't even know what IEP stands for. The fact that people don't even understand what a 504 plan comes from, the fact that it's a law, you know, all these things that we don't take the time to do, or the fact that most people don't understand that there's IEP criteria that will eventually enable you to access that IEP. So it goes back again to like, yes, there are people who are just not capable because they just may not be able to have that within them to be able to do that. There are parents who are just maybe not going to be able to care for various reasons, but there are some that do, and we don't make it easy for them either. So they get discouraged easily because it's very overwhelming. I will put in language makes a big difference for families as well. So there's a lot of families who cannot access information in their own native language if English is not their native language. So that is a barrier, because then how can you have someone who can fully articulate a conversation with you that they can only do it in another language other than English? And so that makes it a lot easier for them to also access what they need to have to be full key players at that table.
So for me, there are some parents, it doesn't matter what race they are, that really don't care about education. It's not that they don't care about education. The school system was traumatic for them as a child. So they're expecting the same experience for their child. For me, education was not important prior to having children. It was, you went to school because it was the law, you went to school. When I had my children, I could see how bright and promising they were. And when we're talking and they're saying, I want to be a marine biologist, I know in my head that's your dream and that's what you want to do, but you have to have an education to accomplish that goal. And some parents, you live in certain situations and you can't see past the block you live on. So it doesn't seem like there's a future there. And, you know, we just go by day. We take it as it comes. If they get the education, that's great. If they don't, then, well, a lot of times the children go to school and they have learned more than what their parents know. And they're only in the 5th grade. Parents, we care about your education, but we can't assist you with your homework at home because we don't know the answer. We don't know how to do it ourselves. It was an incident. So my middle son and I were like oil and water. And I'm like, you have to go to school. School's important, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, well, you don't. So I signed up to go back to school, you know, to show him the importance. And, you know, I'm preaching, learning never ends, et cetera, et cetera. And when he sees me sitting down at the table with him doing my homework, it's like, okay, so what she's saying is true. She can talk the talk, she's walking the walk. I guess there is something to it. I have a sister, she has an undiagnosed intellectual disability. And my children are asking why she never has any money and why she spends so much time at work and still has no money. She didn't finish high school. They had a thing here where she could fill out a workbook and they'll give her a high school diploma. Most of the conversations that go on, she cannot comprehend what's being said to her. So she just smiles and nods. She works taking care of adults with intellectual disabilities, and she's happy at her job, but she still makes $10.50, and she has to work 18 hours in order to make enough to pay her bills. She has 2 children, and they hardly ever see her. So, I have to show that to my children because, you are able to understand and do these things, but you're choosing not to. There's some people out there who don't have the choice. So education, it's really important. I just think it's a situational thing. There's other things that may take precedence over the education, like food, shelter, etc. Safety.
I also wanted to call out, I'm not trying to hijack your questions, but there's some wonderful resources being shared in this chat. There is, I think someone put in a link to understanding special education in simple language, a link there if you're undecided or you're not sure how to tackle this elephant and you want to make sure you're as educated as possible. There's a great couple of resources. There's some resources Tim has shared regarding grandparents and others for kinship, how to take care. So please do make sure you copy a couple of these. I think Tim's going to share these links as well. Facets is shared. I know there were some personal conversations regarding how do I get support? How do I find out how to read? I don't think I'm getting this and this from my IEP. Family Voices of Wisconsin and Facets help you with some of that. So do check out the chat as well when you get that shared from Tim to maybe help some of these other specific questions that are being asked.
Someone asked me something the other day, if I can just add. Someone asked me the other day, what about if I don't want to do any of this because I'm already tired? I'm exhausted. I think that's a reality that many of us don't always talk about. I'm exhausted, you guys. I work, right? I'm a mom. I have to figure out a way to balance all of this. I don't resent this. This was what was meant to be. This is my life. I have embraced and I love my children. But it does remind me that I have to find ways to take care of myself, to really figure it out how to continue, because this is exhausting. There's no social worker out there or case manager or service coordinator that's going to do all of this for us, because it's not. So I think some of this reminds me also of how easily I get overwhelmed when I think about all the things that I worry about for like the school year or things that need to be done. And ironically, my son's principal said to me, it may help you. And I think that she gave me the same advice that she probably gives to the teachers. She said to me, maybe it would help you if you just focus on 2 goals that you want Ben to really accomplish this year. Holy hell. And I knew this, right? I know this, right? And so it's like preaching to the choir, right? But you know what? Sometimes we do need to hear from other people. And the reality is that sometimes we overwhelm ourselves so much because there's so much going on, right? And we do want to fix things and we want to make this better, and we can't do all of it. So putting that in perspective, that when you're getting all of this, making sure that you're pacing yourself, because it could easily drain you if you're not taking care of yourself.
Let's once again go back to Lola, because that was so phenomenal. And remember what she said today that she does to keep hope infused. Mm-hmm. Take that time, surround yourself with loved ones, get a dashboard check on where you were, how far you've come. Like there's things that you can do. And Daysi, thank you for bringing that reality to the conversation, because it is reality. I mean, I'm sure every person is shaking their head like, yep, been there, done that. Yep, felt like that before. That was, I just said preach, Daisy, because that's really true and impactful. I think it resonates with every person here, no matter where you're at on your journey.
And I'd like to add, you have to keep a separation between what your goals or visions are for your child versus what theirs are, and figure out how to put them together. My son wants to be a race car driver. No parent really wants their child to be a race car driver, but I understand, this is his dream, his goal, or etc. So I respect it. He looks it up and he talks about it constantly. He finds the car that he's gonna have, and we go through this. And all the time, I'm just like, please no, please no. He's at the age where he can start driver's ed. I've retired from teaching driving lessons. I've taught one. I have one who has their permit, but I've retired. I can't do it. But I leave that to someone else. Maybe another male who will respect and can tell him race car driving is only for the race car track and things like that, and show him the right way to drive. But there's another thing too. I shed many tears in the beginning before he had a diagnosis and everything. But there was tears for him. There was tears of resentment because I had to dedicate so much over here trying to get this done. And my other two children are telling me that I don't love him. Only one I think about is him. So at the same time, I had to teach my other boys what's going on with him and how things work. And we had set schedules at home when school's out. Spend this much time with this one and this one only. I spend this much time with this one and this one only. We have reading time together and we have game time together. And that was the thing, trying to get it together. Just because this one has special needs or he needs a little extra love doesn't mean that we can't do things together, because I have to think about them too. When my older son got sick last year, I had to leave my two younger children back behind with my brother for him to take care of. And we've never, interacted like that. My younger son, he's kind of hard to tear away from. And for him to do that, that was traumatic. By the time I made it home, he was really, really acting out. And my whole thought was, oh my God, I've messed up. Oh, I should have been here. I should have only stayed at the hospital this hour and come home during these hours. And it's just like, there's one me, but there's so many pieces of me. And, we've talked about it. We've gone over it. He was in the hospital most of March, part of April. And we were home during the few months. My mother came and stayed with me, and he got used to her being there. So it was okay if I wasn't there when he returned to the hospital in June. So, that's the thing. You have one child need a little extra than the others, but you have to let the others know sometimes it's your turn when you need a little extra, and it's okay to ask for it.
This panel has just been outstanding. I want to thank you all so much. And I know Tim put in the comments the link to the survey, that's the evaluation. That's Tim. Do you want to say anything before we go? I know we're about out of time.
We are right against the noon hour, and we want to honor people's time that they said they would join us between 8:30 and noon. So we really do appreciate it. Again, the community practice is not a workshop. It is not an event. It is a gathering. So I appreciate the sharing in the chat. I appreciate the panel so much. I am so full from everything that I have learned. today and that everybody has shared today. And I appreciate this community so much. So please know, we would appreciate feedback. Also know that if you chose to allow it, you will receive interaction from us. We'll put you on our listserv so that you know when the upcoming community practices are. We will be compiling the resources from the chat, and we'll get that out to the attendees and the registrants, along with when we are able to get the videos posted. But thank you again to our panelists. Thank you, Emily. Thank you to CISA One. Thank you, Urban Autism Summit of Milwaukee, for reaching out and partnering. I love what we do, and when we're able to partner together. Stay tuned for what the community of practice on autism spectrum disorder and developmental disabilities will be doing over the winter. So hopefully you'll join our listserv and you can join us for our next gathering. Thank you all so much. Have a fantastic rest of your day.